My name is Jamie Asbridge. I'm from Rapid City, South Dakota, and this is part of my testimony. Blessed and privileged to be able to share it, knowing that it's one of the weapons that we have to combat the enemy. I think the word says that we overcome by the word of our testimony, and I believe that's because as we recount and remember what God has done, that there's power in that. There's not only for ourselves but for others. And so just pray that this testimony would empower you, would empower the body just to overcome, to know that if God will do it for one, he'll do it for another, and that he's no respecter of persons. And so I grew up here in Rapid City. I grew up in the 80s, and I was what was known as a latchkey kid. For those that don't know what that means, that just simply means that both my parents worked, and oftentimes came home to either no supervision or would go to a friend's house that also maybe had the similar situation, or maybe they had a parent home, but for the most part, unsupervised. And before I say any more about that, at the same time, I just want to honor my parents. They weren't believers, and doing the best they knew how. They did a lot of things right. They gave us, I have an older brother, and the things they did give us were very valuable. They did a lot of things right, and so I just honor them in that. I think in this area, maybe just ignorant or naive to what the potential pitfalls that could bring. Again, this is kind of right in the height of the war against drugs and all that stuff. So this is before cell phones and the dawn of the internet and all that stuff. So I think in a large part, my parents were just blind to what was really going on, the enemy's schemes, and just what could happen. Like the word says, I think, a child left to themselves brings shame to their mother. I think that's how it goes, but that's really the case. And so from a very young age, that was kind of the scenario where I was going to school, being heavily influenced by my peers, and then that time of being unsupervised by outside of school, but before my parents came home, just really was critical, and it really led to just a lot of darkness, a lot of attempts, and successful attempts by the enemy to ensnare me. I mean, by the time I was out of elementary, I had already seen pornography. I'd already, a friend of mine one time was at his house, and he said, "Look at this." And he pulled out from under his dad's bed a big glass mirror full of cocaine. So I'm talking 3rd, 4th grade. These are the kind of things that I'm encountering. And again, having no frame of reference for any of this stuff. This first time I seen the pornographic image was me and a friend walking in a park, just walking down the sidewalk and not searching any of that out, and just walked up upon a magazine just flapping in the wind. And so it's not a surprise to me that later on I would deal heavily with both of those things, cocaine and pornography and lust. But that kind of just continued throughout. Again, so that's elementary. I go into middle school, and it just kind of gets worse and worse as there's the lack of supervision. The friends that I was attracting, all, for the most part, almost everyone from a broken home. So even though my parents were together, they were, they weren't, I wasn't supervised, but I had a good home. They were loving, they were caring, they were encouraging. I was athletic, so they were encouraging in that way and were always around for those things. But almost everybody that I was spending time with came from a completely different scenario. Broken home, alcoholism in the home, abuse in the home. And that was one of those areas that the enemy used that unsupervision, I guess, that time apart from the good things I had in my home to really expose me to a lot of things. And so, again, through middle school, it just got worse. First time I used alcohol, I was walking home from school with again, in that scenario when you're just kind of unsupervised, people you don't even necessarily know or hang out with, you find yourself being with them, doing things with them that you never intended to. So again, just walking home from middle school, 13 years old, and just stop at this girl's house, a bunch of us, and we raid the liquor cabinet, just stuff like that. And so I think one of the tricky things too was because I was athletic, I think my parents thought I was successful in that. I excelled in sports and played all kinds of different ones. I think that was even more deceiving because they had the illusion that I was okay, or like I was normal, doing normal kid things. And the reality was a lot of the same, there was a lot of overlap, a lot of the same kids, a lot of the same brokenness, these broken homes they were intermingling. And so that same instance, walking home and drinking, was with a friend that later on we went to baseball practice. About a year later, playing travel league basketball after a tournament one night, staying at some of the other teammates' houses the first time I smoked marijuana. So I just put that out there because I think it's important to understand like the pitfalls of that there's now I have 3 kids, and so I look at it from this other perspective of like, you really have to be aware of what just because it seems like something on the outside, it has a facade of looking like just good old American family or friends. A lot can be lurking behind the scenes, and it's definitely a tactic of the enemy to try to entice children, young people, by using these things that are very deceptive. And so that kind of just continued, and my drug use really just kind of each layer. By the time I'm in high school, I'm using LSD and psychedelic mushrooms and just about anything that would be put before me. And that's when I really started to get into cocaine use, and really started to see the transformation or the shift from it being kind of peer pressure, doing it with friends, to now it's shifting to I'm consumed by this. I don't actually want to even be with other people. I want to just it to be me and my drug. And so that's late in high school is when I saw that shift. And it really started to take a hold of me. Meanwhile, also all the way through this time, all the way back to elementary, kind of like I was talking about this first exposure to pornography. Again, a lack of supervision and understanding of what actually was going on, even in the school system then, started to become sexually active right at the end of elementary, full blown into middle school. Again, that was something that followed me, I guess, and something that was a reality all the way from a very young age. And so, like I said earlier, the enemy definitely put his target on me in that way as a very young, innocent, had no, I didn't wasn't searching those things out. Really was kind of like presented to me in my life. And so get all the way to through high school. Again, kind of pushing the boundaries of getting in trouble with the law, and different things are starting to become more frequent. And after high school, I ended up meeting my wife. Actually met at a rave. So I would have been about 20 years old. And for those that don't know what a rave is, it's just a glorified, it's just a dark dance party, techno music, and usually is adorned with drug use, ecstasy, and whatever. And so that was something I was accustomed to doing in high school. But this one night went to this party, and that's where I met my wife. So, again, you can kind of understand the starting ground for this is pretty rocky, right? So she was in that lifestyle too, not to the extreme I was. She was just comes from a very broken home, and very angry, and was just acting out on that anger. And so she was attractive to me in that, because I also was kind of just caught up in that. So met at a rave, had a very rocky start. But about 6 months into our relationship, she got pregnant with our firstborn. And this is when things really started to shift for me. Again, I was still kind of in and out of this world of it being social and kind of in the party scene versus the isolation. And this kind of tipped me over the edge to full isolation. In part, so when my wife got pregnant, praise God, she just quit all of it. Like she's never been a real addictive personality, and she had the grace and the wherewithal to leave all that behind, smoking everything for the sake of our child. And it was almost as if when she did that, I picked up her slack in that, I guess, I don't know how else to describe it. I came probably about as doubly as addicted and bad in that time. And so that just caused a lot of conflict between us. And again, she's not a believer at this point. She had some seeds planted from her father growing up. And so there's some of that in the back of her mind, but we're still just living in darkness. And so we ended up moving to Denver, Colorado about this time. And again, I full stooped and now kind of transitioning from cocaine to meth. And so I'm selling it, I'm using it, I'm doing whatever I can to acquire it, hurting a lot of people, damaging a lot of trust with my wife and especially my parents. We go to Denver, Colorado thinking we want to live in the big city, and ended up being really the darkest time of our marriage. I was running with some really bad people, doing some horrible things that could easily, one little thing goes different. I'm probably in prison for 25 years, maybe more. That was the kind of activity that we were involved in. And praise God, it's also even though it was the lowest, my wife was dealing with a lot of anxiety, and even would say she was hypochondriac, like going to get MRIs and CAT scans. I'd get a call, I'd be at work, and she'd be like, I'm at the emergency room getting a CAT scan for absolutely no reason, just other than she felt like she was dying. And so that was the kind of mental torment she was in. And praise God, through that, one of the things her dad used to do growing up is listen to different music artists, Christian artists, Keith Green, Rich Mullins, some of these guys, Steve Camp, and was sending her CDs, knowing that she was going through some of this, feeling isolated because I was, I was not a suitable husband or father at that time, and she was struggling with all this. And one night, just listening to Keith Green, she got saved. She gave her life to the Lord, and the music ministered to her, the word, and pretty amazing. So she gets saved there. I am in the worst season of my drug use, and so she actually left. We separated. I stayed in Colorado, and she came back to Rapid with our son, and we lived this off and on deal. Struggled through. I eventually came back home, and we were still separated. And through all this time, I'd gone to inpatient treatment, I'd gone to outpatient treatment, did various things, but kind of get to the main point here is, through this time, there was just a series of events that led up to the Lord really apprehending me. One of them was, so again, we're living apart, and there was a man that I used to work for my father, and there's a man that my dad hired who was just an evangelist. Like, he just loved Jesus, loved talking about him, knew my situation, and was constantly encouraging me, towards the Lord. And I wasn't necessarily ready or wanted to hear it, but finally he said, would you at least consider taking your son to Awana, which is like a Wednesday night youth program for little kids? And me and my wife talked about it, and we agreed, like, let's do that. If nothing else, it's good for him and whatever. And so through doing that, we started doing that. There was a particular family that really latched out, especially to my wife, because I was kind of out of the picture still, and just loved on her, would not relent, would continue to reach out to her, and eventually got her to start coming to their weekly house meeting, like small group, which eventually I joined, kind of reluctantly, because I'm a full-blown meth addict at this point, and just my life is completely a wreck and living in darkness. And so started going to this meeting, and there was just something different about it. And it took some time to realize it and see it, but it was amazing to see families, men enjoying their lives, having these great relationships with their kids and their wives and with each other, without all the drugs and all the things I'd taught myself over the whatever it is, last 12 years at that point, that I needed to enjoy life. And I was at the point I couldn't imagine life without that stuff, So just seeing that, them welcoming me in and loving on me, they would allow me just to bring my questions, my doubts that I had about God, and they received me, and that really spoke a lot to me. And it's one of the things that helped set me free. And so I was doing that for probably about a year's time. And finally, they knew I was struggling, and they were trying to help me. But finally, one of the guys whose house we were meeting at asked if I would meet with him privately, and I did. And he said, I don't know what else to do with you. Like, I've never really dealt with somebody that has been this bound and unwilling, like, keeps the cycle continues, and there's not really a lot of change. Again, I'm not even a believer at this point, but he said, only thing I can think to really do is, would you submit to us if we drug tested you every week? And again, doesn't really make sense why I would agree to that. I mean, most people in that situation are trying to avoid, drug tests, and whether it's with work or the law or just any of that. So started doing that. week after week after week, and I would do good and I would fail. And then this one night, and that eventually got to the point where the guy said, okay, if you fail again, like there's got to be a consequence. We're gonna send you back to treatment. And so go good, and then I failed again. And for the first time, I just really felt like this. There's a different type of conviction. Like I'd done a lot to hurt like I said, my parents and my wife and my kids at this point. For whatever reason, this night there was just this shift in me, and I remember asking them, like, would you guys like give me another chance? Like I don't. Again, you're coming from an addict who says this continually, just give me another chance. And they granted me another chance. And so I go home the same night. I go home, and just in that complete brokenness mindset, I'm like, I'm going to use the last of what I have. Again, that bound that you're still, even in this situation, it's too bound to just let it go. And so I went in the garage, and used the rest of what I had. And then by this time, about 3:00 in the morning, I come into the house, and my wife's got her Bible sitting there, and I just sit down on the couch, and I just opened it. I was just like, at this lowest point, I just opened it, and I opened it to 1 Corinthians 6. And just my eyes went right to the letters, started reading, and it's where Paul says, do not be deceived, neither liar, nor fornicator, nor drunkard, nor adulterer, nor reviler, thief, all these things. Like, don't be deceived. You're not going to inherit the kingdom. And then it goes on to say, such as some of you were, but you were washed and you were sanctified and justified through Jesus, through the Spirit. And just in that moment, I just recognized that conviction of the Lord came. I recognized that that's who I am. I'm every one of these. Like, there's not one of these things on this list that I don't identify with. But Lord says you can wash me. And so I just, right there in my living room, I just gave my life to the Lord, said, I want you to wash me. And I just remember this peace coming. Again, I think it was a sign the Lord gave me. Like, so I just got done using all this meth. Should not be tired or restful. And this wave came over me, and I just was able to lay down on that couch, and I fell asleep. And that was 17 years ago. And when I woke up, I was completely, the bounds and the chains of drugs were gone. Like, just in that moment, one moment's time, I never had a desire to use again, which was amazing. Still remains amazing to me, and is something I'm just so grateful for. One of the things I often talk about with that is, so that was gone, but the consequences of a lot of that. There's some things that the Lord delivered, even the consequences of. Like I said, there was definitely a lot of times I should have been locked up or possibly killed somebody. So those kind of consequences he delivered me from, but there was a lot in the way of broken trust, things I had to do and walk in for years before I seen the fruit of it. Or, again, here I am, 12-year drug addict, saying I'm never going to use again, which sounds like clanging cymbals, to most people. So I knew it internally. I knew something changed, but nobody else did. And it was one of the areas that I think is important in the testifying, is that I wish I would have handled that better. It's one of the things I look back on, and I think I failed at in a large part, of allowing that fruit to be not only produced in me, but also the opportunity for others to examine that, to taste that, and see that this is something different here. I was very defensive. I was very just angry. and felt like people didn't trust me, and I didn't have the understanding of the time to look at what other people's perspective was, how that was going to take time. And so it took a lot of time with my wife, even to the point that, praise God, I don't know where this came from the Lord, obviously, but the leader of that house group. So we continued testing. They continued testing me every Wednesday night until that was months and months had gone by, and it was clean and it was clean. And then he had this idea from the Lord to give the remaining test to my wife, and said, anytime that she suspects you for whatever reason, like, you're going to submit to this, she's going to be able to test you. And boy, she did. And that was hard. That was really hard. Talk about humility, talk about having to swallow some pride and admit that, yeah, this is right. And so, praise God, he set me free from that. One of the things that in that time also, that really, it was like, got set free from that. But one of the things the enemy really did kind of double down was on the lust and the pornography, where that came in. I was already caught up in that, but once I got freedom over here, this thing became really raised. Like, it became very heightened. Again, all these things I know now they're not the root, they're something else is going on that causes us to run to these things. And so I ran hard to those things. And praise God, through another series of divine encounters, things that the Lord led me to and exposed me to, I was able to get free. I just felt led to share this. For me, with specifically pornography, I'll never forget, there was this night that, again, I was already starting to have a change of heart and mind, starting to see things differently. By this time, we have 3 kids, our youngest being our daughter. And something about when you have a daughter and you start to think of her related to some of the things that go on against women and the mistreatment and misuse of women, start to see things a little differently. So that stuff was already going on, but I'll never forget this night. Paul was on a computer, and going through these websites, and this image popped up on the screen, and it was just straight demonic. It was literally demons. It was animation, but it was literally demons mistreating women, like abusing them, raping them. And that was supposed to be, I guess, attractive to certain people. But it was absolutely disgusting to me, and it repelled me, and it opened my eyes to the reality that this is really what this is. This is actually what is the spiritual reality behind what appears to be. And it is a facade. It's made to look one way, and it's not. And so in that time, again, praise God, I was able to see that in the sense that it really completely changed my heart. Praise God, that's been several years now that bondage has been broken. And so really through all that, what the Lord has done with that has just been, it's been amazing to me to be in a situation now where the Lord has been able to use that freedom, walking through those things, watching the Lord not only set free, but restore. That's one of the things that he really did through all this, is the way he, again, so me and my wife have been married now for 21 years. And we got 3 teenage or old, young adult kids. And there's no, I think about it like the young boys, Hebrew boys in the fire. Like, there's no trace of the stain and the smoke of that, all those years of darkness and destruction. Like that has been, I don't think anybody would, that doesn't know us, would meet our family and have any idea of what kind of darkness we were in, and the effect on our kids is gone. Like there's no stain that remains. And so it's given us a lot of hope for others, like to be able to really so one of the things that the Lord's led me to is about almost 10 years ago now, is to start going into the local prison with that number one aim, is to bring hope to a place that's very hopeless, to guys that feel like they have lost it all, or have damaged relationships, whether it's with their kids or with their spouses or parents, whoever, to be able to come in and testify and say, no, the Lord can restore and bring life to, from death. And so praise God, I've been able to do that. One of the areas that the Lord's taken, redeemed even the things I've gone through, to comfort others and to bring restoration to others. And so that's something me and my wife are passionate about. Another thing is just because of our experience with the church, with that body, seeing what the power there is in love and accountability, and people really knowing us and us knowing them, and having that kind of relationship. Like our hearts have always been set ablaze for like the real body of Christ, for the community of God to be what he's designed it to be. And so that's something else that the Lord's led us to in a large way, to continue to encourage others and continue to partake in that intimate fellowship with other believers, knowing that it does produce life, and it produces the things that God has intended it for when we do that. And so again, just super, super thankful. It's one of those things that it's almost like another life, and the only things that I feel like the Lord allows us to retain some of it in memory, to be able to offer hope and to testify, but it's like another lifetime. It's like something that almost feels like it never happened. That's how much he's removed us from it, and removed all the effects of it. So again, hopefully that is encouraging. I pray that it's comforting to know that, again, what he does, that's part of the hope. That's part of going back into some of the world that I used to come from, to offer that hope, is knowing that God will do that for others. It's nothing special about me, nothing. Hopefully through that testimony, you can see that I was so broken. I was completely lost, completely unable to manage my own life, to make decisions. I was just doing the little things that I didn't even know God was leading me, honestly, to. Now I look back and I see his hand in it, but I was just so lost I didn't even know. And so in that, my prayer is that you see that, how he works in that, and how what he'll do for one, he'll do for another. And so I just prefer any brother, sister that is struggling with addiction of really any type, and is feeling and is experiencing the destruction of it, to know that God really has a desire and the power to restore and make completely new, make whole.